Fridays, we'll be going over directives.
Okay, so Trey showed us some really cool things that we can do with services to kind of abstract away the data components so we can just get information without having to worry about the details, and also how we can use controllers to add, data binding and stuff, right? So now let's talk about another awesome component about Angular, and that is called directives. So this lets us encapsulate our information even further. For demonstration purposes, I'm actually not going to use the portfolio stuff because we have a lot of code in this. I'm going to start afresh, and we'll go from there. Okay, let's get started. So first thing we're going to do is grab AngularJS, and we're going to add ng-app my app. Yep, ng-app my app, and then in our body we're going to do an ng-controller my ctrl in there, and then inside our script we're going to create my app with no dependencies, and angular.module my app controller my ctrl. We're going to inject the scope, and we're going to try to do scope.hello is equal to hi there, and inside index.html we're going to do a p hello, and inside script.js hello hello hi there, yay. All right, so we have our AngularJS working now. All right, so let's talk about directives. So a directive is a cool way of encapsulating information. So we can create custom elements like this. For example, in our body, you know how we can create a div, and then inside the div we can have content, right? We can say, hello, this is text inside a div, right? We all know how that works, and that's pretty cool and unexciting. But what we can do with AngularJS is we can create custom HTML components, all right? So an example of a custom HTML component is as follows. We could say cat would have its own properties. We could say dog has its own properties. We could say we have a form that has a special type of property attached to it. For example, form has a superpower. The superpower is Pac-Man. And we could add superpowers to this form without having to create a function and then bind the function to the form. You know how like in jQuery you would say form.onClick function, right? And then you would say when the function is, or when the form is clicked, then alert, do something cool, right? Well, in Angular we don't want to do things this way. What we want to do is we want to encapsulate everything inside descriptive HTML elements such as form, so that we can keep everything declarative versus imperative. Imperative programming is for var I is equal to 1, or if I is equal to 0, I is less than 10, I plus plus, do something. Imperative programming is something.map function item.
Can I scroll up so you can see it?
Oh, yeah, sorry. That's actually as far up as I can scroll. That's a problem, isn't it?
Windows size.
Yeah.
Press a lot of enters and then
Oh yeah.
yeah, just press a lot of enters.
Yeah. Critical thinking skills. Thank you. That's good. All right. Can you guys see that? So this is imperative versus declarative programming. This is very hard to understand compared to this. Well, actually, that's debatable in this case. But if we had an array bag, we had an array, right? And we could iterate through the array like this with the for loop, or we could iterate through the array like this. The second approach allows us to not worry about how we're traversing through the array. We just know that map will traverse through the array. And then we could say alert item, and this will alert cat1 or cat2. All right? So this is a much better approach in any programming language because it allows us to not think about the direct implementation or the direct means by which we're going to achieve a goal, and we just need to worry about storytelling. I want this to happen when this is on the screen. We don't have to worry about when this element appears on the screen with this ID, do something, right? Because that is a very fragile way of thinking. So that's what we're going to do here with our directives. So first of all, let's do it the dumb way. The dumb way is we have a div, and inside the div we have a header, and the header is going to be called name of person. Name of X-Men. And our X-Men, I don't know, name, actor. What is a good X-Men actor? Hugh Jackman or whatever his name is. I don't even remember. Probably spelled that wrong, but it's okay. All right. So Hugh Jackman has a name. His X-Men name, which would be what? Wolverine, right? So Wolverine is played by Hugh Jackman, and we want an image, right? Because Hugh Jackman is awesome. Yeah, I definitely spelled his name wrong, I think. Yeah. How do you spell his name? Oh, no, actually I did. That is him. Oh. Okay, so let's view this image. Not stare at it too long, but let's copy the URL and paste that in the source here. Okay, so that's humongous. Let's do width is equal to 100 pixels. Whoops, 100. All right, so now we have Hugh Jackman and we have a picture of him, right? So what code did we make? What code did we have to write in order to create this Hugh Jackman tile? We had to create a div, we had to create an h3 tag, we had to create a p tag, and then we had to create an image tag, right? This is a pain in the ass. If we had 2,000 different ones, we would have to copy and paste this 2,000 different times for every single actor in the movie X-Men, right? And this becomes more tiresome than the sequel or the prequel after the sequel or the sequel's prequel or whatever they're doing these days, right? Or The Hobbit Part 3 or whatever. So let's undo all this, because, oh, if it lets me undo. No, okay. Once it's done, it can't be undone. So, all right. So we don't want to have code duplication, right? And one awesome way that we can reduce code duplication is what Trey taught us, in that we can create a div that has an ng repeat, right? Ng repeat, and then you can repeat over some elements, and it'll just repeat the code inside it over and over and over again, right? With different methods. And we're going to go ahead and do that really, really quickly. I'm going to create a new file. No, I'm lazy, so I'm going to do this inside script.js. I'm going to create a controller. TRO. I already have a controller, just kidding. I'm going to use my controller that I already wrote. And instead of hello, I'm going to call this actors. Or no, what did they call it? They're not mutants, yes. Scope.mutants is equal to an array of mutants. All right. Does anyone have a favorite mutant? Well, we already started with Hugh Jackman's, right? So we can't really back off from that now. So the name is Wolverine. Actor is Hugh Jackman. And we want an image, right? The image was that big thing that we had. Oops. Clipboard. Awesome program, by the way. It can do everything. It's called Alfred. This one. All right. So now we have the name, actor, and the image. So let's do this one more time so we can, show that we have an array of things, right? What is another awesome, what is your next favorite X-Men?
Cyclops.
Cyclops. Good choice. Do you know who plays Cyclops? All right. Yay, autocomplete. Okay. Actor. Please Google. Okay. Google knows all. Actor is this person, and let's grab an image of him, which is conveniently provided to us. Whoop. Whoa. Or not. View image. This is more reasonable. Okay. All right, so we have two actors. So let's assume we have, all the bajillion actors that are in this movie, right? We want to transform this JSON object, which we could presumably grab from a server somewhere, right? From some awesome, sexy, API that someone wrote. And we want to convert this into some sort of format that we can display on the screen, right? Right now, we have a div that has Wolverine, that has a p tag, that has an image, right? We want to convert this and go through every single item in our array and do the same thing for all the actors. Let's do that really quick. So inside of our div, we want to repeat this. So ng repeat, just like what Trey was telling us. We want to do, let's say, I'm lazy. So instead of saying actor and actors or whatever, I'm just going to say A in actor. Wait a minute, did I call it actor? Mutants, no. M in mutants. 6 characters, too much typing for me. So it's just M, all right? M in mutants. And for each mutant, we have an H3 for the person's name, right? So it's just m.name. Oops. Let me select it first. m.name. Aha. See, starts coming up. Wolverine and Cyclops. And then what else do we have? We have an actor. And this was m.actor, right? And how about the image? So what happens if we do this? What happens if we say source is going to be equal to m dot, what was it? Image. All right. It works. There's another thing that you can do. You can do ng source, unless they deprecated this recently. Nope. So you can also do ng source, which is better in some cases because it'll wait for the entire thing to load before putting it into the DOM. So you don't have flicker, you don't have some weird issues. So we're going to use ng source. So now, if you guys can see, as you guys can see, we have Wolverine and we have Cyclops, nicely formatted, right, in our HTML here. Do you know what the problem with this is? The problem with this is when our developers come in, they want to look at the code that we've written for this. They're going to say, all right, I want to stick an actor tile on this screen. To do this, I have to create this div. And I'm going to copy ng repeat m in mutants. I have to know that it uses an h3 to put the name in. I know it has to use a p tag to put the actor in. And I know that I'm using an image with a width 100. And I have to stick in something called m.image to put the image in there and populate that dynamically, right? I have to be aware of this entire structure, this entire approach to doing things. In other words, you're letting the skeleton out of the closet, and you can see the skeleton, right? You want to keep the skeleton in the closet so you don't have to worry about the implementation details, because that's messy. We want to, as programmers, we have enough to think about on our own. We don't want to think about too much. Yes?
Can you quickly repeat what is and how did you declare it?
Oh, yes, absolutely. So mutants is this object in scripts, right? That's an array. And in AngularJS, we have a directive. Haha, we're actually using directives already, and you guys don't even know it. So we're using a directive called ngRepeat. ngRepeat is going to go through. It has this nice syntax that lets us select every single object inside of the array. So mutants is an array. M is each object in the array. So in scripts, we have mutants, and it's going to select this first object. Within this first object, which we're calling M, we have a name, we have an actor, and we have an image. To access every single instance of the actor, to access every single object and its properties for every single instance in the loop, we can just say m.name, and it'll go, the first iteration, it'll go through Wolverine, it'll go through Hugh Jackman, and the second iteration, it'll go through Cyclops, and it'll go through James. Right, so it's kind of like a for loop in Java where you're looping through objects. Like, what is it in Java? Something in something else or something like that? I don't remember. Java.
Something called an array.
Oh, okay. There we go. Oh, I'm probably thinking about C# or something. Yes, thank you for that. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Feel free to interrupt me at any time, guys, because I get carried away with this stuff. So, all right. Before we continue on, let's make these tiles a little bit nicer looking, so we can kind of understand why somebody would not want to see this ugly implementation. Why they would not want to look at this div with this h3, with this p, with this image. All right. So to give us a better illusion of what we want, we're going to add another thing to this. We're going to add a class, and we're going to call this cast. Tile. Let's call this tile. And inside our tile, we're going to do a tile border 1 pixel solid light gray. This isn't a CSS presentation, so I'm just going to not really explain what I'm doing. Add a border radius to it because border radius makes everything cool. Add some things to it. Oops. Margin, bottom, 5 pixels. Function XY, 2 pixels. Light gray. Yes, there we go. Okay, so can you guys all see what I did there? Wolverine, the tile now has a little tile thing around it, and it looks a little bit better. Okay, let's constrain the width. Display in the true spirit of being tiles, right? So we have 2 tiles now, right? Okay, so we as developers, we're giving people this new actor tile thing that they can use on their website, right? Can't resist. Can't resist. Better. Okay. So as developers, we want people to be able to access this tile that we've created. So imagine if on your GitHub repository, you want to get an avid fan base of people, loyal followers that are going to do whatever you say, right? Because they're going to see your awesome code and they're just going to follow your blog. It's going to be great. So you say, guys, I created this amazing directive. I'm created this amazing little code snippet that you can use to populate actors, and it'll give you their name, it'll give you their picture, and it'll give you their in-movie name, right? Their character name. So to do this, all you have to do is two things. You have to go copy and paste this gigantic amount of code, which, trust me, is not going to be this small in real life. You're going to copy and paste this gigantic amount of code into here. You will be able to see the exact implementation details for every single part of it. You have to remember, you have to call this variable mutants. And once you have a scope object or scope variable called mutants, then it's going to populate all your data. So not only do they have to copy and paste your code, which is really ugly, right? They also need to know exactly how you implemented it in order to be able to use it themselves. This really sucks because as developers, we want to give somebody a box that's black, and all they need to know is how to push the buttons on top. And then all the gears and all the spindles and all the whirly bits and all the batteries and everything, those are inside this black box, right? And all you care about is what it spits out. It spits out a little receipt that says, here, I have Wolverine and it's played by Hugh Jackman, and here's this ASCII art picture of him because, this is like a receipt, so can't really do color on those things, all right? So that's what we really care about. We don't want them to have a transparent box and they can stick their hand in the box and screw stuff up because it's not going to work, right? So how do we encapsulate this code and make it easier for everybody to understand? That is what a directive is, and that's what we're going to do today. So let's get started. I'm going to keep this implementation up here so you can kind of keep that as a reference, but we're going to start working on a directive. A directive can be defined in many different ways. What we can do is we could say, what is this called, a tile, right? This is probably like an actor or something. Or, what should we call this, guys? Should we call this a tile, or should we call this like an actor tile? Actor tile? Okay. Just tile. All right. So we could call this a tile. But we're going to talk about what we want it to do before we actually implement it, okay? So we want to create a tile that a person can use in their code without understanding how the heck it works. And in the tile, they can specify some sort of data object, right? Inside this data object, we can say, okay, I'm going to pass in some object that I know will have the name, the image, and the screen name, right? So this would be some actor object, right, that we'll know about. Then we would know that there's some sort of image attached to it. So whatever image we have in our thing, we just pass it in here. So image or actor.jpg or something like that, right? So when we look at these two different implementations, we have this giant mess where we can see everything that's going on, and we can very easily like delete this by accident, right? To this implementation where we just have one HTML thing with a data attribute and an image attribute. In fact, we can even get rid of the image attribute and say the actor needs to have the image inside of it, which in this case actually makes more sense, right? So now, if they want to go through every single actor, they would just do div ng repeat actor in actors, and they would put this tile inside of it, and the tile would have data actor, so it gets each actor. And we let the tile, actually, I think you guys are right, actor tile sounds better. And we let the actor tile, thanks Jen, we let the actor tile do the work for us. So can you guys see how the second implementation, how this implementation is better than this implementation? A lot cleaner, right? So now let's actually try to write this. So first things first. There are two different ways we can define this. A lot of browsers are picky, i.e. So what we want to do is we want to actually just call this a div, and we're going to call this actor tile, like this. This is an alternative way of specifying a directive or creating a directive, and this is called an attribute definition because actor tile, the name of the directive itself, is an attribute of the div. All right. The nice thing about this also is that we can call this a p tag, we can call this an a tag, we can call this whatever we want, and it doesn't care. All right. Cool. So let's get started. In our script.js file, we're going to start by creating, I'm going to create this way up here. Inside of our my app module, I'm going to create a directive. Wow, that was easy, right? Just going to create a directive just like that, okay? Inside the directive, we're going to have a callback function, and we're going to have a return. The return object is kind of like what starts everything. Once your directive is run, it's going to run everything inside this return object here. So this is where we can configure how our directive is going to work. One of the first things that you'll want to do is restrict how this directive can be run. So you're providing the user with some rules that define how you are intending this to be, how you intend the user to use your directive. So we're going to say restrict, very descriptive, and we're going to say A. A is for attribute. And remember, this is an attribute of div. Remember, if we did actor tile, right now Angular will actually throw an error. It says, wait a minute, what is actor tile? You can't do that because actor tile is an element, just like div is an element, just like body is an element, and just like h3 is an element, all right? If we specified A and E, E for element, AngularJS is now being told accept both property, both forms. So now if you try to run the code, this actor tile and this actor tile will both run the same way. So it's a semantic difference, but in our case, we want to stick with the safer bet, which has some subtle differences that I won't go into here, but it can save you hours of debugging. And we'll just stick with this actor tile, and we're going to go in our script to make sure nobody screws this up like we have. We're going to restrict it to attribute as well in our directive definition. Okay? So now we just restricted it to A. Because we are developers, what is the first thing that we do whenever we try to learn something new?
Google.
That is the second thing. The first thing we do is hello world. Okay? No, you're right. It's Google first and then hello world. All right. We're going to apply a template. A template is simply a string of HTML. And this string of HTML can be anything that we want, and it's going to be stuck directly where we put our directive in the HTML. A directive is basically a target that Angular knows about, and it's going to inject that target element with whatever you tell it to do, or with whatever code and functionality you specify. And that'll make a lot more sense in a minute. Inside our template, we're going to create, a strong element. We're going to call this hello from directive. Strong, end strong, like that, all right? Now if we go back, resize this. Oops, wait a minute, forgot that. Let's make sure we have the right thing.
You did not name the directive.
Yeah, I did not name the directive yet. I'm gonna delete, no actually I'm gonna call this actor in mutants. I'm gonna keep this exactly the same way, just to so you can see the parallel. And then you're right, I did not name the directive because I was getting so excited. We are gonna use something called camel case, lowercase camel case, to define the directive name. Now, the directive name can be anything we want. Notice how in our index we called it actor tile, and we do not call it this. We do not call it actor tile. The reason for this is Angular, or JavaScript rather, has the minus sign reserved as a keyword. So depending on how you use this could catastrophically fail. That's why you never use them for variable names. Instead, what we're going to use is actor tile, which is camel case. And this will get converted into something called spinal case. Spinal case is when you have actor dash tile like this, all in lowercase. You know, if you have a lot of these, it looks like a spine, right? Ha ha ha. That's, you know, programming humor. I don't know. It's spinal case, guys. it's going to convert your lower camel case into spinal case. So you always start with a lowercase letter, and then any other word that you want to use will be an uppercase letter with no space in between, and it'll convert that into this. All right? Does that make sense? All right. So we have our actor tile. If we look at the very bottom, we now have two. Oh, you guys probably can't see that, right? Can everyone see that at the very bottom there? Okay. Hello from directive, hello from directive. We have two tiles, Wolverine and Cyclops. Guess how many hellos we have at the bottom? Exactly 2, right? Sweet, so we're getting pretty close. What we just did, All right, hang in with me, guys. What we just did is we created an actor tile that injects the HTML hello from directive. And that's all it does. So what we just did was the same thing as writing a div with a p tag that says hello from directive, right? We did exactly the same thing, but except we're programmatically creating that element. What I'm going to do also is I'm going to move this, since we're working on this part, I'm going to move this at the very top so you can see it better. There we go. That's a little easier, right? All right. So this is very useless at the moment because we can't get any information from our directive, or we can't pass any information to our directive. And this is where things get really fun and you'll start loving directives and how they work, all right? All right, where do we stop? All right, so the very first thing we want to do is we want to be able to pass in data that we can then read, right? Remember Trey showed you guys how you can use like curly braces to include the variable names, and it's going to basically do, it's going to inject this with Hugh Jackman, right? We can do the same thing with our directive. But before we do that, we have to do one thing. Instead of applying a template that says strong hello from directive, right? We want to replace this with more HTML. In fact, we want to replace this with this code right here, right? This nasty code that we just wrote earlier. So what do you guys think? Would you like to copy this code, come into here, paste it, and hope to God it works?
Yes.
No. Look, there are four errors. So what you would have to do is you would have to make everything one line. Okay, I'm just going to stop because that's just too painful, right? We don't want to do this, all right? This is inline JavaScript at its worst, okay? Instead, what we want to do is we want to specify a template URL. A template URL allows us to stick this into a separate file so we can just, we can encapsulate it further, like just stick it in a folder called directives and have the template HTML in there, right? So let's create a new file and let's call this actor tile template.html. Cool. And we're going to paste that in here and we're going to beautify that because nobody likes ugly code. And we're good. So we have our items. We want to get rid of this outer div, right? Because this outer div is creating a bunch of different mutants. We only want to know about one mutant because we're creating a widget, and the widget can only know about one thing, and that's the one thing that we're passing to it, which is the actor, singular, right? So now in our template definition, we let me disable this because this is popping up everywhere that I do things in. All right. Cool, so we can get rid of this, right? Because we don't need this giant template mess. Instead of template and then injecting the template code here, we're going to say template URL, and then we're going to specify the name, the location of the template here. So actor tile template, tile templates.html, right? Okay, guys, did you see what just happened there?
Yep.
All of a sudden, we have Wolverine, Cyclops, Wolverine, and Cyclops. That's pretty cool, right? And guess what our code looks like? Our code looks like, let me comment this part out.
You need to add the class.
Yeah. I'm not done yet. But what does this look like? We have an actor tile, and then we have a data attribute called actor, right? This data attribute is not doing anything right now. Because right now, if we look at our script.js, this module contains a scope with these mutants, right? Guess what our directive is in? It's in the same module, and if we look at our code, inside this module, we have access to the scope, right? So this is actually pulling it directly from the scope like a global variable. So right now, we have no encapsulation. We have to say, oh, stick this global object in your scope, and it's going to try to find it for you. And if you don't have it, JK, it's not going to work. Okay? What we really want is if we pull this out and we stick it in a new controller that doesn't have access to that scope, that doesn't have access to that object, we want to be able to pass that object into this data attribute here. Okay? We don't want to have to access it globally and assume that it's there, because that's not a binding contract. A binding contract is when you have an established interface that people can use to create results reliably. The way that we do that is by allowing us to pass in an object through this data attribute. And we could call this anything. We could call this actor or whatever, right? But I'm going to call, well, actually, that's good. Let's call this actor, okay? Inside our script.js, all right, can everyone still see the top here? Inside script.js, we are going to create something called a scope. Does this sound familiar to everyone, what a scope is? A scope is where we're putting all our information in the controller and creating a two-way data binding. The scope is where all this information, like Wolverine and Cyclops, is currently residing in, right? So we want to create a scope that exists only inside our directive. Rather, we're creating an isolate scope, a scope which can talk to the outside world, but if you name a value inside your isolate scope called actor, and you have another actor in your main scope, they won't collide because it's in a separate namespace, you can think of it. So we want to create a sandbox, and all the variables are going to be inside our sandbox and can't be touched outside of it, all right? So we're going to say scope, and we're specifying our custom scope. So inside of our directive, remember our directive is just this div called actor tile, right? It cannot talk to the outside world. We do not want it to be able to talk to the outside world. By adding that isolate scope, look what happens to our directive. It says actor, actor, and it has nothing, right? It has no information. It doesn't know anything about our mutants object, right? And this is fantastic news for us. Because imagine a gigantic application with 400,000 lines of code. You happen to name something called mutants that's nothing related to this directive, and all of a sudden you're getting random objects and you're getting random errors, right? Because, oh hey, because you're using my directive, you cannot use anything called mutants except for me. That's just really selfish, right? Okay? And that's just bad form. So this is good. The fact that it's giving us nothing now is fantastic. It means we expect you to put something in the sandbox in order for us to play with it. Okay? It's like having a toddler and you're saying, you can't play with the fireworks, just stay in your sandbox, play with your shovel and play with your little toy truck. Okay? Now, let's pass in our actor. Let's think of an isolate scope as a box. You're trapped inside the box. There are no windows. This is a prison, okay, for the mentally insane. You look outside, you cut a hole in the box, and you can now get past information. Okay? Like you can get your food, and you can get new clothes and stuff, right? From this window that you cut into the box. So the regular scope, which is the outside world that exists in your controller, has access to all this additional information, right? You can pass specific pieces of information into this isolate scope box. So you can pass certain information from your main controller, in this case mutants, you can pass it into the box through a window, right? And then the guy on the inside will take it and use it for something. In this case, the actor is going to be the mutant, all right? It's still going to do nothing, but when we go to our script, we can specify cutouts. So we're going to get an X-Acto knife, and we're going to cut out a new window, and we're going to call this window, I already forgot what I called it, actor. So inside our scope, our isolate scope, we have a new window in it, and that window is called actor, all right? And the actor, here's a little bit of a magic trick. Our actor is going to have this equal attribute to it, equal value. And you're going to be wondering, like, what the heck does that mean? So in AngularJS, you have to get used to a lot of conventions because it's very much a convention over configuration framework. That's what frameworks do. They're very opinionated. This particular framework says if I use an equal sign, I'm going to allow for two-way data binding between one object outside the scope and the object inside a scope. So what this means is that I have a window on the inside of my box. I have a window that has no glass. It has no glass between you and the outside world. So you can actually stick your hand outside of the box. You can then grab an apple from the guy on the outside. You can then eat the apple and give him the core back, right? That's what this equal sign means. It's an equality, which means that what comes in will also modify, whatever you do on the inside will also modify whatever's on the outside, okay? So you're able to pass information inside and out of. This is fantastic for us because what if we wanted to modify the actor's name or something from inside the widget? We now can do that, right? All right, so now we have access to our actor window, right? On our scope. Now we passed in the mutant M. M, remember, contains one object, right? It contains this one object with name, actor, and image, right? Inside of our template HTML file. Wait, why do I just have an image in here? Oh, you know what? I need to probably refresh this because it's hiding it from me. It's trying to be crafty. Yeah, it's still trying to be crafty. I think because the window is too small. All right, cool. So inside we have this m.name, m.actor, m.image. It's very sad. It's very lonely. It's not working. We want to make this work. We want to populate this blank view with cool stuff. Right now, the only thing it knows about is actor, right? Because this is text that we stuck in there. Like if I do this, that'll also pop up, right? But none of the variables are working. So how do we get that working? We're going to go back to our script file, and we're going to say, I now have this actor thing. I just have to use actor, because I'm naming the scope variable actor. So in our index file, when we originally, like down here, right? When we originally named our variables, we called it m in mutants, and then we accessed it with m, right? For us, it's actually going to be actor.name because we're calling our scope variable actor. So let's comment this back out. And now inside of our template, instead of m, we're going to call it what? Actor, right? Wolverine pops up. Now the actor name pops up. And the fun part, the images pop up. So the awesome thing about this is, again, encapsulation. Because now, what is this actor? This actor only exists in the context of this directive. This directive is isolate in scope, meaning that it is inside its own black box, which means we can have multiple black boxes, right, that exist in our world. They would not know about each other, right? They would only know about the information that you pass into it. All right. Now, we're still missing one thing, and that is we're missing the style. Because right now we have like this H3 situation going on. And remember in our original code, we have this nice border. We have this div that has a tile attribute to it that makes it nice and cool looking. So we're missing all of our styles. Right? We want it to look like this on the bottom, right? How do we do that? How do we make it look like that? There are two ways that we can do this. The very first way is we can comment this code out here. And we can come in and create a new div here and wrap it and class, class is equal to, I'm going to call this actor, I'm going to change it to actor tile, and then inside my styles I'm going to call this actor tile as well in the spirit of that. So now it shows up like this, right? So I mean this is okay. If we right click on this and we inspect the element, whoops. Yes. Well, not divs per se. What we end up with is, wait, let me refresh this. What we end up with is a div called actor tile. Inside of that, we have a div called actor tile. The reason I say it's not necessarily a div is because if we called this a p element, it would just be a p element out here. Okay. So this is bad because we are now creating a duplicate like actor tile that's nested inside of this extra div, and it's unnecessary. We just want the actor tile stuff to pop up on the div itself here, right? So there's a very easy way to do this, very easy fix. We just come into our script.js because Angular has a lot of predefined options for us. We just specify replace true. And by adding replace true, we now end up with much nicer looking HTML code for those who actually want to go and look at it.
What does replace true do?
Replace true, see how now we have one layer div? Earlier we had another div outside of this that has the actor tile stuff in it. And then inside of that div we had a div that has containing all the H3, P, and image stuff. But now, true to the spirit of the directive, the div is itself the directive, right? So now we have just this div, and it automatically injects the H3, the P, and the image. Does that make sense? So back to our original code. Just to reiterate what I said before, let me make this a little bit smaller. Our original code, we started off with this. We started off with a div that had a repeat, and inside of that we just hard-coded the H3, the P, and the image, right? Now what we're doing is we're still iterating through each item, but instead of exposing the H3, the P, and the image, we create an actor tiled directive that acts as a black box. The black box will generate the HTML for us and spit it back into the div. So now instead of having 3 lines of code where you can very easily comment something out or accidentally delete something or put a typo in it, right? We now have 1 line of code that is fully encapsulated, that has its own scope, that has its own variables, and also its own functions. And we're running out of time, but by its own functions, I mean inside of your script, you can also specify the link function. The link gives you scope attributes like this, and then you can do scope dot hello is equal to a function. And this function only exists inside the directive. So now if you had alert, hi there, my name is scope dot scope dot actor dot name. And then inside of our directive here, we can add a button, say hi. ng click. I'm going to change that. Say hi. So now when we refresh this, we have a button that says say hi. When we click on it, it says, hi there, my name is Wolverine. If I click on this guy, it says, hi there, my name is Cyclops. This function resides in the context. Let me make this smaller. This function here, remember our scope is isolated, right? So this function only exists inside the scope of this directive's instance. So all the data that this directive has access to, it's going to react to that. So now you can delete, you can modify the name or whatever for that instance and not have to worry about any other instance. Okay? So that's really cool. So in a nutshell, that is what a directive is. It allows you to encapsulate functionality without having to confuse or burden users with all the implementation details. You can keep that separate. You can create your own module and put it on Bower or something like that, and people can just download your module, use it without having to know what you did. And that's pretty much it.